Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and we are back. Don't call it a comeback, though. We've been here for one season at least. I'm Mike Carlson.
I'm Brian Heisenbottle.
And this is The View from the U
Season
2. Okay, Brian, my man, Everett Golson is back. I don't condone cheating or the fact that you should be able to come back from football because you were cheating. But he had a great first game out. And, you know, the rust, whatever rust he had, it wasn't there. It didn't show.
Well, I mean, he's a talented guy in general, and you really see it in going up against not the best teams you usually do for week one, but he just shone like a star. It's really promising for Notre Dame football.
Yeah, Rice is by no means a tough team to play. I mean, they're one of the worst teams in the FBS. But the fact that Golson put up the numbers that he did and did it all by himself, I mean, his passing was much improved, his running was much improved, the guy's faster, he's bigger, he's stronger. I mean, this guy has improved immensely, I mean, from his freshman year, and then obviously he improved a ton with the year off, and I mean, this year he's going to, I feel like he's a legitimate Heisman contender right now.
And it's really great to see that with that year off, he didn't just sort of slow down and stop, because that was a possibility, but this guy's just powering forward, and it is kind of good to see that. I mean, he's had his problems, but it's good to see he's back, ready for more football.
And that leads us into our second topic of today. We got to talk about the rising stock and the falling stock, Brian, of players, coaches, maybe a state, if we throw that in today. I mean, there's obviously teams that after the first week, you know, the hype was unjustified, and for some teams, I mean, we have to start paying attention.
Yeah. I think the big thing, it's funny you mentioned state, because the state that is on the decline right now, the entire state of South Carolina. You'd imagine pretty big football state around here, but turns out with Clemson, South Carolina, the first two games, not doing well. The quarterback situation is not working well, especially I saw a lot of Clemson's game. You got to have a run game to back up the passing attack. If you don't have that, then you can't win football games, especially in a competitive conference like the ACC is becoming. And
talking about you, the guy who has his stock going up right now is Kenny Hill. Obviously, Johnny Manziel is a tough guy to follow up, you know, in your first season as quarterback, but he shattered 5 or 6 of Johnny Manziel's career highs, some of his records at Texas A&M in his first game. Not only his first game, his first start as a college player at the quarterback position. Brian, that's unreal.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to come out without jitters, quite another to come out first game in a huge shadow left by Johnny Manziel and come up with 500 passing yards.
Exactly. And
unreal.
Exactly. I mean, the system that someone has in place. Obviously, I mean, you got to say Texas A&M as a whole, the stock is up. There was a question mark at quarterback, but I think right now, you know, they're going to make the SEC a tough conference to play, and especially if Alabama has to play them again this year.
Yeah. One team that's looking good in the SEC brings up the name Gurley. The Georgia Bulldogs are absolutely on fire. They absolutely tore Clemson to shreds. This is exactly what Clemson lacked. They have a passing attack. Hudson Mason is looking really good. He got 1 start or 2 last year with Aaron Murray's injury, but now he's back. He's playing well, and the Georgia Bulldogs look like they could really make a run for the SEC title.
Well, and Todd Gurley's a legitimate Heisman contender too. I mean, you have to look at a guy, he's a great running back, a lot of speed. Obviously, last year there were some bumps in the road. You know, Aaron Murray, the whole Georgia program kind of fell apart. You know, they got the injury bug real bad. But I think that, you know, this year they're going to make the SEC tough again. Whereas, you know, second half of last year, Georgia, you know, was run over by everybody. They were pretty much the punching bag of the SEC. So I really love you know, seeing them playing some quality football again.
It's a real swing to go from losing to a team like Vanderbilt to absolutely destroying Clemson. But Mike, as we must move along, let's talk about the sorry state of the Ohio State University. Such a sad story. Braxton Miller, ready for another great year. I mean, Ohio State's looking to make a run at the national championship. I mean, what are you going to do?
You know, it's tough, you know, especially with that shoulder injury. Urban Meyer had done a great job, you know, leading up to that, leading up to the fact when he was re-diagnosed with that injured shoulder. He had been putting him on a pitch count almost like a major league pitcher. You know, he was only allowed to throw X amount of balls in practice, and, you know, he gradually worked him up. But I think, you know, you can't do anything about this shoulder injury if you're Urban Meyer. It's not your fault at all. But I think they got a good quarterback in Cardale Jones. I mean, obviously this guy is not a Braxton Miller type of player who knows the offense so well. But he's a guy, he's going to be a good quarterback. He'll win you some games. But if he brings you to the national title, you know, that's highly debatable at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Ohio State has shown really good depth in the past. I mean, if you look into last year or two, I mean, Kenny Guyton was sort of a no-name behind Braxton Miller, and he's still a very legitimate quarterback. And Ohio State's still a very stacked program. It's just unfortunate that their star horse is the one, say, going down.
And of course, last year they lost Carlos Hyde. This year they lost Carlos Hyde to the draft. They've lost a number of really great defensive impact players. So this is an Ohio State team that, the Big Ten's wide open now, Brian. I feel like if you're any team playing in the Big Ten, you have a legitimate shot to win it because Braxton Miller's out.
Yeah. So Mike, this year we got the 14 playoff, first time. Who are you picking? Who are your 4 guys?
Well, first of all, I'm glad we're in a 14 playoff. I'm very much anti-BCS in that regard. But it's going to be tough. I really think that Notre Dame is going to be that 4th team in, just because of Everett Golson. I think going into this year, a lot of people, there was a question mark surrounding Golson, so he wasn't put in the top 4, and that's understandable. I totally agree with that. But I feel like now that Golson threw 5 touchdowns, I feel like he is that number 4, seed type of quarterback that you can have. And then number 3, I think you got to go with UCLA. I really like UCLA. I think Brett Hundley, he's matured this year. He's become a great leader. I have a lot of friends at UCLA, and they said, this guy, he makes the throws. He's the leader of this team, unquestioned. And then number 2, I think you got to go with Alabama. I'm really sold. I'm not sold on the quarterback situation by any means, but I'm sold on Alabama. This is a team that is coached by Nick Saban. They're hungry. They should never have lost the games that they lost last year. I mean, you talk about the miracle return on a field goal kick that was botched. I mean, Alabama found unique ways to lose last year that you just don't see happen. So I think Alabama makes it as the number 2 seed. And then I think your number 1 seed obviously has got to be Florida State. They got an easy schedule. Jameis Winston's gotten better. This is a team that has so much swagger to them. You talk about the loss of Kelvin Benjamin. That doesn't matter at this point. I think Florida State is the unquestioned number 1 seed. It's just a matter of are they okay with having that target on their back, and can they go out and just win games and play their game? So those are my 4 picks.
And Mike, I do have to disagree with you slightly. I feel like the loss to Kelvin Benjamin is really, really big to this Florida State team, because you're looking at the guy, at least his physical stature, his build, completely unparalleled. I mean, this guy, I'd be surprised if he wasn't an absolute success in the NFL. But the thing is, he's that big guy. He's that big target that Jameis Winston has. And I feel like the passing attack is kind of closed down. And we did kind of see it against Oklahoma State, how it was a closer game. I mean, coming into if they were playing them last season, I'd imagine a absolutely massive victory for these guys. But we didn't really see it anymore. So my 4 teams, number 4, I got to go with Stanford. I think that Kevin Hogan has been doing a lot of work. He's been maturing, and you got Christian McCaffrey, who's really promising. You've been telling me about. He's actually a local boy from around where we live. I think they're really promising. I feel like they're going to edge UCLA and get that Pac-12 in. My 3 team, that's where I'm going to put Florida State. I feel like they're going to just be that one-loss team that's still very good. They still got Jameis Winston, all that talent. Really good chance of making a run for the national championship. Number 2 is where I have Alabama. Again, they're a Nick Saban team. Very good team. I feel like they sort of have the pressure off their back. As of last year, there was so much pressure to just make sure they were still number 1. They don't really have that anymore. They get back to being a good Alabama football team, and I think they're really dangerous. And then number 1, I got to go with Michigan State. They looked so strong going into the end of last year. Connor Cook, while he did take a bit of an injury in the Jacksonville State game, I think he's going to be back on his feet. These guys are going to be coming in strong, and I think they're going to have the number 1 seed by the time the playoff starts.
And I think the playoff is going to be interesting this year because you want to see a team like Alabama play a team like UCLA. Just because, it's like one of those great moments, and I think the playoff is going to give us that ability. I'm really psyched to see it, Brian. I think, now that we're minimizing the computers, we're bringing the human element into it. I think, college football can only, go up from here.
Yeah, it's great that they're sort of integrating it because, there's so many teams in college football. In the BCS system, it was a way to make sure everyone plays, but it's not a really good way to determine the winner because, like last year, Alabama had a great season, but you threw them out the second they lost to Auburn. Same with Ohio State, the second they lost to Michigan State. So I feel like just having this playoff is a bit more wiggle room for the very good teams that have just had 1 or 2 hiccups here and there.
Exactly. So let's move on here. We got to give a shout out first of all to Christian McCaffrey. Brian, he had a little bit of success this weekend, if I do say so myself.
Yes.
He scored on his first touch from the line of scrimmage. Ran a little bit of a post route, got the ball, and he's gotten faster, Brian. We thought he was fast when he was in high school here. No. He got faster, and wow, he's going to be a weapon for Stanford these next 4 years.
Yeah, it's quite one thing to see them run around the defenders of our alma mater, but it's quite something else. It's something completely different to see him run around, while maybe UC Davis, still a D1 FCS high-level team, and I feel like it's going to keep going. I feel like he can run around, maybe even like an Oregon State, Washington, and we'll see when he comes to test. Maybe Stanford can beat Oregon for yet another time.
Exactly, and that's where we're going to move on. I just want to point out a couple of my favorite game day signs. I loved watching College Game Day, but my favorite, Brian, was I sprained both my ankles making this poster, and it was a Fight On Trojans reference. I thought that was hilarious. The guys who do that, I mean, they're awesome. I love it.
Yeah, it's really one of the great things about watching college football wake up, because, again, it's like the human element. You get to see all those people. I mean, it just brings me back to the national championship 2 years ago, Golden Domers versus Mobile Homers. That's just absolutely classic, hilarious, and really kind of funny. But speaking of comedy, you had a little Mr. Twitter here ran into some of the best twittering in his life. Tell us about what you saw.
I really love to use Twitter, and I love using Twitter, love going on Twitter, and there's so much great things about it. But I had to give a Twitter shout out this weekend to Everett Golson. Obviously, he was so hot. I mean, I couldn't believe it, and it was ridiculous. I talked about it earlier. I mean, this guy's a legitimate threat right now, and I tweeted that if you get any closer to this guy, you're gonna burn yourself. I mean, that's how hot he was against Rice. He did it all. He scored 3 rushing touchdowns, threw 2 beautiful passes down the field for long touchdowns. I mean, I can't say enough about this guy, Brian. He's my Jameis Winston for this year. This is the quarterback. I feel like that's going to make things very tough for the committee.
Yeah, your Jameis Winston of last year, Mr. Jameis Winston himself, suffered a bit of a Twitter hashtag crisis as well.
To say it was a debacle, I feel like would be an understate. They used Florida State. It's a great idea in theory to throw out hashtag Ask Jameis. However, in theory is one thing, then is a lot different than in real life, as a lot of people, didn't take it super seriously. You had your serious answers, obviously, but a lot of people asked, are you a lemon butter or a garlic butter fan with your crabs? I mean, Brian, this is a social media, it was a disaster, a social media disaster.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite the massive press conference they hoped it would be where Jameis is answering questions. I mean, you know Twitter about as well as I know Twitter. We know that there are all those jokesters out there, and heck, they wanted to poke fun at Jameis Winston. What are you gonna do? I mean, he's had his problems.
Yeah, I mean it's been brutal. So I think that puts us out of time. I mean, we're trying to keep the shows to 10 minutes this year. Don't want to overwhelm you. Just give you a quick recap of college football. So we'll see you next show. Watch the Week 2 action. For the View from the U, I'm Mike Carlson.
I'm Brian Heisenbuttle. We'll see you guys next week.
See you later.